my family, we all sat around and we were told that we were going to have a baby. I was so excited about it. I was excited because I had 2 younger sisters and I wanted a brother to balance it out. I was ready for the baby to be born. When my mom was ready to go to the hospital, she told my sisters to go stay with my aunt. But she told me, Tom, you can stay home with your dad. 2 boys just sitting around. We had a huge pile of dirty dishes. It was beautiful. Every night we made popcorn. My job was to put the butter on it. Every night I wanted to put more and more butter on top of it. One night I made the perfect popcorn. My dad went upstairs to change clothes. While he was upstairs, I put in the popcorn a whole stick of butter. It was so much butter. It would just drip from my hands. I loved it like that. My dad came down and looked at it, and he was like, Tom, if we take that to the living room and we get all that drippy butter on the couch, Mom, we're going to be dead. Mom is going to be so mad. He said, I think we should go to the beach. Dad said weird things sometimes, so I just look at him. But he went to the closet and pulled out a towel and laid it on the ground in the hallway. In the living room, he turned the TV on. He set the popcorn on the towel, and we sat on the towel like we were at the beach. We were just eating the popcorn, watching TV. This was a long time ago when the TV was black and white and boring, but it didn't matter. Dad and I were just sitting, talking on the towel. But the phone rang. Dad went up and he was talking. He looked sad, so he hung up the phone. I said, Dad, what happened? What? Nothing, it's fine. Tom, it's fine, Tom. I'm going to take you to your aunt's house for a few days. So he packed me up and sent me off. I continued to live at my aunt's house for 2 weeks. My aunt was on the phone talking. I kept asking her, what's wrong? She would always say, nothing, you need to go home. Finally, she said, you need to go home now. I was like, boy or girl, which? What happened? It's a girl, Tom, but when you go home, please try to be careful and not make a lot of noise. And I was like, well, what happened? But she just took me home. I got home and ran up to the living room, and my mom and dad and sisters were all sitting there. I was looking, where's the baby? I couldn't find the baby. My family, we all sat down. They said, we have a little sister. Her name is Margaret. But something happened. She had a sickness called cerebral palsy. I was like, what does that mean? Mom and Dad told me that maybe she wouldn't come home from the hospital, but if she did come home from the hospital, she would always need to sit down in a wheelchair. Maybe one day when she's really old, she can walk and have crutches. They told me to just stop asking questions and to be quiet for a little while. So I walked upstairs to my room. I felt awful. I was thinking about the baby in the hospital, how she was all alone. So we just waited, and there was a phone call. My sister, she could come home. So the day my mom and dad went to bring her home, they told me, Tom, go put on your suit and a hat and stand at the door and wait. You can't play outside. My aunts and uncles all came to the house. I can't eat food because I'll spill it all over me. So I just stood there, waiting and waiting and waiting. I looked down the road, and there came my car. It was an old car. It was gray. I looked in the car. There was my dad and my mom was holding the baby. It was a pink bundle, and I knew that was my baby. I wanted to be the first person to see her, so I started walking down there, but I looked behind me, and I could hear something. All my aunts were coming running out, so I wanted to be patient, so I opened the doors, and all my aunts came running past me, and they all crowded around Mom. So they brought the baby inside. Everybody was standing all around her. I was standing outside. I couldn't see her. I kept trying to see her. I couldn't get close enough. But one of my aunts got up and walked into the kitchen. She was a scary woman. When she walked into the room, people ran away. So she started walking back into the living room from the kitchen. So I got behind her. I just followed her and held onto her waist and moved her, and people kept moving out of her way. And we arrived at the crib, and now I could finally see. I moved her over to the couch to sit. Now I could look at the baby. I saw her. I put my finger in, and she grabbed my finger and looked up at me. She had pink lips, and she looked up at me and smiled. I felt wonderful. But my aunt, she looked at her and she said, the baby has gas. I said, no, she likes me. She likes me best. My mom looked and she said, you like your sister? I said, yeah. But Mom, I think maybe you got the wrong baby. Why did you say that? Mom, look, there's nothing wrong. Mom said, yeah, there is something wrong, but it's inside her body. I kept looking and looking at her. There was nothing wrong, but I kept looking. My mom worried all the time. She never wanted anything to touch the baby. She would always put jackets and hats on the baby and cover her up. One day she was putting socks on the baby and her legs were getting swollen. My mom ran to the phone. I was looking at the baby. I was looking, her legs, they were getting bigger and bigger. My mom called the doctor. This was a long time ago. The doctors, they would come to your house when you called. So we stood at the window and the door and waited for the doctor, and he came running in. I liked this doctor. He was cool. He was the same size as me. So he ran into the house and looked at the baby and looked at the legs. He was looking at the socks. He took the socks off and the legs started to go down. The swelling started to go down. the socks were too tight. The doctor was trying to calm my mom down, and she said it wasn't going to hurt the baby, but my mom, she never calmed down. So when my sister was 2 or 3, she started crawling. And that's when I knew something was wrong. Her arms moved fine, but her legs, they didn't move at all. But she still liked me the best. I knew because every time I was in a room, she crawled to be in the same room. And she would pull on my leg and try to pull my socks off. It was cute. But one day, she was 3, I was about 10. I was sitting at the table working on a science project. She came into the table, she crawled under the table and started to pull on my pants. It was cute, I know, but I was busy. For the first time, I just blew up. I started yelling, "Margaret, stop, quit bothering me, bother somebody else, go away." And then I started working on my project again. It was only 1 or 2 minutes later, I started to feel awful. So I was looking around trying to find her. "Margaret, Margaret." I was looking around. She was sitting in the corner against the wall. Her back was against the wall, and she was just looking at me. She was glaring at me. I looked at her and she just smiled. And then she started to push up with her legs against the wall. She started trying to stand up. Slowly, she started to stand up against the wall, until finally she was standing up. Remember, they said she was never going to walk. She was going to sit in a wheelchair forever. We looked at each other, and she took 1 step, and then another step, and then another step, and then another step. She was walking. I started yelling, "Mom, Mom, Margaret's walking, Mom, Mom, Margaret's walking." So I ran into the kitchen. "Mom, Mom, Mom, Margaret, she's walking." So we ran into the dining room, and we arrived and we looked, and Margaret, she was just sitting there. Mom said, "Tom, do you think that was funny? Did you think I would laugh? I told you she will never walk. You shouldn't talk about that. You're going to break my heart." I told her. Mom started crying and she left the room. I looked at Margaret. Margaret just smiled. This continued and continued and continued for 3 weeks. Whenever we were alone, she would stand up against the wall and start walking. I would run to tell somebody. We would come back and she would be sitting down, just looking and smiling. Finally, I told her, "I don't care. I don't care." She could walk, or dance or anything. I don't care. I was never looking again. That got her attention. She started walking. I looked at her, and then I looked past her, and Mom and Dad were standing there. They started yelling, "She's walking, she's walking." You remember, I was still a little mad. Nobody believed me. I used to end the story here, but people had questions about her. Now she's grown up. The sickness, she didn't have a lot of it. So she could walk, go to school, go to college. It was hard. She struggled, but she finished school, got a job. But we always thought she was alone. No one was in her life. for just herself. But one night I got a call. My phone rang. I answered. It was Margaret. She told me, "Tom, are you coming home to Boston soon?" I'll try, but I travel. I travel a lot. Tom, I met someone. I want you to approve of him because I think he's going to ask me to marry him. The big brother and me arrived at home and met him. I liked them both. He was nice. I said, okay. He asked my sister to marry him. We asked my sister, "What do you want for your wedding?" She said, "I want to walk down the aisle with no help." My sister, she still falls sometimes. And if she falls, she has to go to the hospital. But she wanted to do that, so we planned the best we could. We got shoes that were flat. Her dress was a little short. There was no paper on the aisle. That was all we could do. We couldn't do anything more. Finally, the wedding day arrived. Everybody was at the front. She carried her flowers down the aisle and walked down the aisle to the front of the church. In the middle of the wedding, she had to stand up. But when she stood up, she lost her balance. My family, we all did the same thing when that happened. We all reached our hands out to try and catch her, but we were too far away. We just had to watch. She lost her balance and was falling and falling, but she caught herself. She didn't fall. And that was it. That was the end of the wedding. They walked down the aisle together, and it was over. She never fell. Then it was time to start the reception. The husband and wife dance, and everybody circles around them. I was watching them, and I was crying and crying and crying. I was embarrassed because I thought people would be looking at me and laughing at me. So I wiped my tears off and looked around. But nobody was looking at me. The bride and groom were looking at each other, and everybody else was crying too. They couldn't see anything. On the day she was born, if people had told you that one day you'll see her dancing at the wedding, we would have thought that you were being mean. We thought she would never walk. That story is true about my sister, Margaret.